Hey guys, just want to share two Blitz games I just played with an opponent rated. It was a bit higher when we started, so high 1300s, and there's some really nice tactics going on in here. So two games, one is white, one is black. I'm just pretty pleased with them. Guess what? We're going to Vienna, and then we get the full copycat, and the full copycat is great. You know, when your opponent mirrors your knight move and your bishop move, then the move is queen g4, and you're targeting this. Now what you're really wanting to see is this queen out here, which point you attack the queen with a knight and invite queen takes f2, king d1, and we get that amazing queen trap line, which is super spicy. But here my opponent misses the threat, instead pushes d6, discovered attack on the queen, and loses a pawn. All right, now there's only one good defense here, I think, and he finds it, which is queen f6. And then we've got a dilemma. Right, now if I trade queens, then I've won a pawn. Right, I've punctured his defense because he's got no g pawn, but then his knight comes out for free, and he's going to have 1, 2, 3 against my two developed pieces. So compensation, I don't know. So I play queen g3 here, adding a defender to here. That's rather important, and also just, you know, leaving him with this gaping hole in his defense there. So now he comes in with this, and I get caught by this a lot. This knight coming into this hole in the Vienna. So I just move my king across to d1. Now he develops his knight. And now in goes my knight, right? So I'm attacking the queen, and I'm also attacking c7. So he trades knights and then pushes c6. So now you've got to wonder, where's his king going to find safety? You know, especially seeing as I've got a light squared bishop and a queen still on the board. He's not that easy. So I retreat my bishop. Now here he's got an option to trade, which is a thought. He brings out his light squared bishop, maybe he's thinking about castling, and now d3. And my first thought is this, right? Now black just goes ahead and castles. Big mistake, huge, right? Bishop g5 now, skewering the queen, gonna win material. Queen moves, I grab the rook. Now if I was black here, he's got the option of trading queens, which is a forcing move. I've got to recapture, and then he wins the bishop, right? So he could go up a piece. Now he's actually down a full rook at this point, but what he does is he makes another mistake here. He plays bishop g4 with check, but then f3, right? Now counter-attacking can be good. Counter-attacking with check can be good, but not if your opponent can counter-attack the piece that you're counter-attacking with, right? So now he's got a bishop under threat twice, right? And I've got a bishop under threat, and he's down a full rook and a pawn. Not great. So he decides to trade his way out. Right, gives up his knight, and now he grabs the bishop, and so do I. Right, and it comes with check, and I'm looking at his queen. So we have a trade of queens, but I'm up a full rook and a pawn. Okay, now I've got to be careful. This bishop is guarding this pawn. What I really want to do is rook in there, check, force the king to move, grab his rook. Can't do that. He puts his bishop here, so c3. Let's squeeze the life out of the bishop. Bishop comes in here, king e2. Off you go, bishop. And now the bishop vacates this diagonal. So rook takes a7. King here, rook retreats back onto light coloured square because he's only got a dark coloured bishop. Okay, now he comes in and has a look at my pawn. I'm not interested, right? I could, you know, this bishop is going to get ghosted any time, right? I'm getting a bunch of pawns on light squares here, right? So rook comes in. Obviously I want to develop my knight. I want to link up my rooks and come after the king. Okay, bishop comes in. for no good reason. Rook HA1, bishop comes in again, check. Now I come to here, looking at this. Now he could defend the pawn with a rook, but he pushes his pawn instead. So he's not on top form. Okay, and now a fork. Forking the king and the h-pawn. Grab the h-pawn, happy days. Grab that pawn, why not? And now, because my rook is here, I can play my knight to here, and I've spied this square. That's a great square, it's an outpost. Yeah, can't be kicked away by pawns. It's nice and central, could come in handy. Rook retreats, outpost, thank you very much. Bishop moves again for no good reason at all. And now the knight comes in, and now I've got two attackers on here, right? Now, bishop just moves again. Now, question. Can I, this is a puzzle, right? Can I capture that pawn? Because obviously the king can go to c6, and that is actually a fork, right? Because my knight is the defender of the rook if the rook's on there, and my knight itself is undefended, right? So that's what I calculate. I can capture the pawn. The king does go to c6, because then I have rook a6, okay? And there's actually only one square the king can go to, here, and b4, checkmate. Beautiful little checkmate there. Very, very pleased with that. Thank you very much. Right, let's flip over to game 2. Game number 2. e4. And I'm now playing with this Kadash gambit. We don't get that. I play the Scandinavian, and he takes, and knight f6. And now he plays his knight out here, which is not the best move. Now what I should do here, I think, is go in for the Icelandic gambit with e6, pawn takes, bishop takes. Then the idea is to pop your queen behind the bishop as though you're planning to castle your king, but then you get to move your bishop with discovered check, right? Now that's the idea, but I forgot that, and I play c6 as though I'm in the Kadash gambit anyway. Kadash gambit you play against this pawn move, I think. No, it's not. It's against d4, which is the best move from white. Okay. Anyway, so now my opponent plays d4 and loses his original d pawn, or his e pawn. Yeah. So I've got my pawn back, and I've got a relatively comfortable position already. e6 looks very natural to make a light squared pawn chain, seeing as this pawn's going nowhere. But before I do that, I want to get my bishop out. So he brings his knight out, I play bishop g4, pin the knight. Breaks the pin, e6, simple stuff. Bishop here, so now he's pinning my knight, right? So what do? Same thing, bishop e7, right? This is not rocket science. Okay. Now he kicks the bishop, and I slide back, daring him to play g4 and kick me again. Yeah? At which point I'll just come here, and I'll be on this diagonal. And he's really weakened his king side. He doesn't do that, he comes in with his knight. So, not a threat, not a threat, not a threat, not really a threat at all. I go ahead and trade bishops, okay, then castle. Okay, so now he's got king and queen on the same file. Need to be aware of that. And white decides to castle long. Seeing as he's already pushed one Harry, okay, my knight is no longer pinned. And now I'm thinking, okay, let's go after this king. But interestingly, he's put his king on a semi-open file. So now knight here, and I'm kind of daring him to say, okay, trade this, which on second thoughts may not be perfect, because if he takes and I take back, I've just unsemi-opened the file. I've closed it down again, which is maybe not ideal. But instead he chooses to run away, and now I push a6. So the idea here is to support b5, taking a square away from the queen, and also from the knight. Knight then can't go there, queen can't go there. I'm just trying to close my opponent down. Now he pushes a pawn up, and I play h6 to kick his bishop. Now his bishop can only retreat on that diagonal, but he doesn't retreat, instead he trades. Okay, and that comes with check, so obviously I have to do something. Bishop takes. Now queen into here, right? I take the bishop. I mean, he could have simply retreated the bishop, right? I figure I can take the bishop, because if his queen comes in here, it's not linked with the rook, right? He's going to have to do something with this pawn, and I'm kind of feeling like I can get away with this. I can get away with grabbing the piece, and I shouldn't be checkmated. So pawn takes, bishop takes, and now I'm thinking about this move, kind of defending this pawn, but I do realize if I play bishop h6, right, this pawn will be pinned. So he can then play rook takes bishop. So he moves his king out of check, and now queen f6. Very important move here, I think, right? Because now, if I put my bishop here, rook takes, queen takes rook. Happy days. So he brings up his rook. Now, this looks like trouble, doesn't it? Okay, I've got two attackers on the bishop. So what do? And I can't put my, well, I could put my bishop there. That's a thought. Could get kicked away, right? Then it can't go there, 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 or stay where it is. And can my bishop go here? Well, my bishop can, because rook takes again, queen takes. So I'm kind of okay. So I push my bishop back to h6, but now rook d to h1, and he's threatening again, because this pawn is pinned. So what do? Right? If rook takes, queen takes, I've lost a queen and a bishop for a rook, and I can't recapture with a pawn because it's pinned. So what do? Break the pin. So now, if he takes here, I recapture with a pawn. Okay, and he's down the exchange as well as the other bishop. So round comes the knight. So reason for this is that I've now got two pieces looking at this pawn. So he defends the pawn. And now what we get into is a kind of bit of to and fro. So I'm kind of throwing a few punches and he's trying to block each one, but he can't quite block them all, if you know what I mean. So queen here, and I'm proposing a trade of queens. He doesn't want to trade queens, so his queen moves away. Now my knight moves in here because my queen is also looking at this pawn, which also happens to be pinned. Okay, two attackers. Now this may not be conclusive. If queen takes, king into the corner, and I can't take this pawn because king just takes. Okay, so he brings in his rook, across his rook to guard the c2 pawn. I bring across my rook to add a third attacker. Remember, the pawn is still pinned, so can't move. So I'm threatening to capture here, right? And then, for example, put my knight here or here with a discovered check by the queen, and then I win his queen. That's the big threat. So he can't allow that, so he blocks it. Blocks with the knight. Now, there is now nothing guarding this pawn. So my knight comes back round to address this pawn again. Okay, knight comes back round to defend the pawn again. Now, what I really want to do is capture this rook, but I can't because my bishop's pinned, right? So, again, king g8, breaking another pin. Okay, so it feels like a real kind of roundabout situation here. All right, now, rook c moves back to h1, getting out of line of fire of the bishop. He can't really capture here because then his pawn takes, right? So what would you play in this situation? Yeah. Now there's nothing wrong with repeating moves if it's the right move. Knight b4, adding three attackers again onto this pawn. Okay. Now, because his rook has moved back here, yeah, out of line of my bishop, which is now unpinned, I've now got three attackers again on the c2 pawn. So he attacks my queen, too little too late, queen takes there, and the ending now is forced. King a1, okay? Now, something you've got to remember, right? king's on the back rank, nothing can be done. Queen c1, check. This is the only legal move. Would be rook takes there, and then my rook takes c1, checkmate. My opponent there resigns. So I'm very pleased with this little kind of blitz performance, and you know, I felt like I was playing some decent chess. So I just thought I'd share it with you guys. Yeah, I hope you've got one or two things out of that as well. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.